Allegations that Russia paid bounties to Taliban members to kill American troops. This time on Bill Whittle Now, I'm Scott Ott. And Bill, there is so much that is not known about this situation, and competing stories and denials from various officials all the way up to the President of the United States, that what I'd like to do in this episode is really just kind of examine the consequences of various scenarios of what could turn out to be a very important story or could turn out to be nothing, or as the president has suggested, a hoax. So let's start with this. Let's say that Russia at a government level actually did pay bounties to members of the Taliban to kill American troops. What are the implications of that?
You could certainly make the case that it's an act of war. But at the same time, it's no different than what we saw throughout the entire Cold War. I mean, I'd love to tell you I was shocked about this. So we're going to, just for the sake of the argument today, we're going to assume, just for this discussion, that it's true, right?
Yeah, this is actually a multi-sequence thing where I'm going to ask you about the consequences of theoretical realities.
Okay. So theoretically, if this actually happened, of course it's something that's repellent and objectionable, but I don't see how it's any different than arming the Vietnamese or arming the Contras or arming anybody else. The idea that Russia became our friend when the Soviet Union went away may have been true, for all we know, for a 10-year period or so. But when Vladimir Putin hit the scene, it's crystal clear to me from his international actions, and also from the fact that I'm married to a Russian woman who spent a lot of time in Moscow and so on, that he is determined to restore Russia to as much of its former glory as possible. So while I find this appalling and repugnant, I don't think it's nearly as appalling and repugnant as what the Russian intelligence services continue to do and have done since there's been a Soviet Union, and that's undermined America from within.
So if this does turn out to be the case and Russia actually did this, I mean, I guess one has to ask the question, how does somebody who was a former KGB spy not be more discreet about something like this if it turns out to have been unearthed? But in any case, what kind of response, if any, does that call for from President Trump?
Well, first of all, to this idea that a former spy would never have come out. I mean, this has been happening for quite a while, apparently. Has it not, or is it only alleged that it started fairly recently?
Yeah, that's not clear. And, we're just starting to get the early word on this. There was a specific incident that involved the death of 3 U.S. Marines in a collision with another vehicle that had a bomb in it, and then a firefight afterward. But this is just the tip of the iceberg if it turns out to have been a legitimate case.
I understand. So in any event, I would not be at all surprised if it turned out that this had been going on for 20 years now, pushing 20 years, 19, something like that. And so the question is, what is an appropriate response? The sanctions have had an enormous effect on the Russian people, and I know this firsthand. Of course, in Russia, all of the sanctions are blamed on the United States, just plain, meanness on our part. But an initial set of sanctions was put in place when Putin decided to go adventuring in Georgia with live weaponry, and then additional sanctions when he did the same thing in Ukraine. He has continued to disregard his own people at the expense of his people in order to basically restore what he perceives to be Russian greatness. And actually, my wife said it best. This is within like 2 or 3 days of meeting her. She said, "No, Putin loves Russia. He just doesn't much care about the Russian people." And I think the appropriate response, if it can be proven, will be to tighten the sanctions ever further. And that is about all you can do short of a shooting war. It has an enormous effect on the Russian economy, but the problem is that Putin doesn't feel it. And the people that run Russia through Putin, it is not in the strict, it is a government. It is not strictly speaking like a mafia, but like the Communist Party, there's an awful lot of the elements of the dynamics of modern Russian governance that is very much like a criminal organization. And so much of Russia is basic. In fact, virtually all of Russia is administered through patronage that is issued from Putin. And so Putin doesn't feel the bite. And the people that Putin is depending on in order to keep order and run the country don't feel the bite either. The people that feel the bite are people who'd set up advertising agencies or restaurants, coffee shops, photography studios, all of the budding, what we would call small businesses that were starting to really grow in Russia are just gone. They've just disappeared. It's like COVID-19 for 10, 12 years now, something for them.
Now, in the early days or hours of this controversy, most of the discussion in the media seems not to be about whether or not Russia did this, but whether the president knew about it, the president of the United States, that is. And was he briefed? Was he not briefed? If he was briefed, why didn't he do anything? Why didn't Congress know anything about it until now? Republicans, as we record this, were briefed yesterday, Democrats today. And so, Bill, let me ask you, this is the next hypothetical. The question is, what if President Trump was not briefed on this? What are the implications of that?
Well, if Congress has been briefed, certainly the president has been briefed.
No, this is before, I'm saying back in January, February timeframe. If the allegation from the White House initially was President Trump was not briefed on this issue. Now, it was the White House in the last couple of days that briefed Congress, okay? But previous to that, the allegation is that the intelligence officials did not brief the president on this issue. Okay.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. First of all, I had the words out of my mouth and I just sucked them back in again. I was going to say it's inconceivable that the intelligence agencies would know something of this magnitude and not brief the president. But then I look at what happened to the FBI and the CIA under Brennan and FBI under Comey, and I just sucked those words back in. I don't know what they're doing anymore. I don't know to what degree those agencies still serve the American people and the Constitution. I just don't know. I know most of the people in those organizations are fine people, but the upper leadership's obviously corrupt. Secondly, this is got the smell of the same kind of thing that they're trying to do with the COVID-19, which, in other words, when Trump basically shut down travel to China, he was called a racist. And then after he was the first person to act, months went by, Democrats said, no, come to Chinatown, no, go out and have a great party, have a great time. And then afterwards blamed Trump for not acting sooner, like it's his fault. And this has that kind of a feel to it. Now, it's possible that the president got briefed quite a while ago and did not brief Congress until just very recently. But I don't have a particular problem with that, at least not in the relatively short term, and that's what we're talking about. This is why the president of the United States has limited powers in terms of what he can do domestically, but virtually unlimited powers in terms of what he can do as commander-in-chief and a person who sets foreign policy. If it turned out that the president became aware of this, it would be in the United States' interest, it would be in our intelligence interest in terms of our hand of cards versus the Russian hand of cards. If the Russians were doing this, it would be in our interest for us to know, but not for them to know that we know. And if that were the case, then you can simply walk along, continue to play stupid while you set traps and prepare to gather evidence. So there's that possibility as well.
Now, there's, like I said at the beginning, there are competing stories in this, and some people are saying that the president was briefed. Others are saying actually he received the written briefing, but not a verbal briefing. And as most people know, the president much prefers hearing things verbally in back and forth conversations and is not a huge reader of research. And so it's possible that the White House has kind of left the door open to the possibility that the president received a document about this, but wasn't personally briefed on it. Which may be a distinction without a difference for most Americans. But the final question in this, Bill, would be, what if the president were briefed or read the briefing materials, knew about it, said nothing, did nothing?
I just find that virtually impossible to believe. Now, to say that he did nothing is to say, now you have to ask yourself the question, okay, first of all, let me just say that all of this, again, is right down the old witch hunt alley, and I recognize all the signs in the buildings, and they're the same buildings we saw every single time we went down this path, so let me just get that out of the way. But it is entirely possible that when you say he did nothing, well, it's true he didn't launch a full-scale nuclear attack on Russia. That's true. He didn't do that. And to say that he did nothing is to assume that whoever is making that charge has the full panoply of information available to that person leveling the criticism that the President of the United States has. He may be doing any number of things about it covertly. It's a covert operation after all. And so if you're going to be fighting a covert operation, probably the best way to do it, in fact, historically, certainly through the Cold War, the best way to do it is covertly. We were flying U-2 spy planes over the Soviet Union for 2 or 3 years, and the Soviets never admitted it to their own people, mostly because it was too embarrassing for them. It would have been an enormous propaganda coup. But they decided that there were other reasons that superseded going public. And that's just an example of how things work in the covert world. But to say that he's doing nothing is to imply.
No, I'm saying, Bill, what if it turns out not that he is doing nothing, because we don't know that
he did
right
nothing.
Now. What if it turns out that after the fact we do an investigation, we find out he did nothing?
Okay, so again, this is the kind of thing that implies that Trump is just basically sitting on the couch eating donuts and watching TV. Somebody says, Mr. President, Russians are killing our people. They got a bounty on them. Change the channel. This kind of thing is pure speculation. And because it is pure speculation, and because when you're dealing with the covert world, look, if somebody commits an egregious foul on a football field, and the ref doesn't call the foul, then it's obvious that the ref has failed in his job there. And that's what they're trying to do here, say the president failed. He should have done something and he didn't, therefore, orange man bad. But on a football field, if somebody commits a foul and the ref doesn't throw a flag, you saw the foul, you saw the fact that no action was taken, you have the complete picture of what's going on. To say the same thing in the world of covert operations, where, first of all, as we've said 5 times in this episode, all of this is alleged at this point. There's no evidence yet. And secondly, if the president is going to act on this, you've got to be sure if you're going to take action on any scale, where you are going to now employ retaliatory measures against a sovereign nation, you better be damn sure that what you're retaliating for actually happened. And in the Gulf of Tonkin, we saw an incident where torpedo boats fired on American ships. And then the next day or the next evening, American ships reported being under attack and torpedo wakes in the water. On the second night, there were no boats on the second night. They were there the first day, but there weren't the second day. And so all of this stuff has got a really kind of a bad smell to it. It is framed to create a sense of malfeasance or ignorance or indifference or whatever the case may be. And it's interesting that they're able to construct such a case when, first of all, as you said, there's no evidence that it actually happened. Secondly, there's no evidence that he wasn't briefed or has not been acting on it. There's no evidence that what we had is actionable. There's no evidence that the plans that we may have made in response to this when we discovered it have not already been started or about to go into place. There's so many variables here, Scott, that the whole thing, again, is just a stick. And the reason I defend the president against these kind of things is because it's another example of stuff that happens outside the frame. It's another example of absence of evidence not meaning the same thing as evidence of absence.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're grateful for you taking the time to watch this, especially grateful to the members at BillWhittle.com who made it possible for you to enjoy this for free. They're actually paying for it, and that's because they believe in these kinds of messages. They believe that the conversations sparked by these kinds of episodes are valuable to the advance of liberty in this republic and around the world. If you'd like to join a team of people like that, go to BillWhittle.com and click that big green Become a Member button. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks for watching.